The neighborhood of Willow Creek was the kind of place where the grass was measured in millimeters, and the silence was strictly enforced after 9:00 p.m. At the center of this artificial perfection was Brenda, the president of the Homeowners Association. Brenda didn't just live in Willow Creek, she ruled it. She was the personification of a Karen, complete with a bob haircut that looked like it had been sculpted from granite, and a clipboard that she carried like a holy relic. I had lived in my townhouse for 3 years, mostly keeping my head down. I worked as a freelance software developer, which meant I often worked late and valued my designated parking spot, the one right in front of my unit, above almost everything else. In a complex where guest parking was a quarter-mile hike away, that spot was gold. The trouble began on a sweltering Tuesday afternoon. I pulled into my driveway after a rare grocery run, only to find a gleaming, oversized white SUV idling in my spot. Next to it stood Brenda and an older woman who looked like a slightly more wrinkled, even more judgmental version of Brenda. This was Evelyn, Brenda's mother, who had recently moved into the complex and apparently inherited her daughter's sense of divine right. I rolled down my window, trying to keep my voice polite. "Hi, Brenda, is everything okay? You're in my spot." Brenda didn't even look at me at first. She continued pointing at my flower pots, whispering something to Evelyn. Finally, she turned, offering a tight, toothy smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Oh, Elias, my mother is visiting and she has a very sensitive hip. She needs to be close to the walkway." "I understand," I said, "but the guest spots are just around the corner. I have about 8 bags of frozen groceries in my trunk." Evelyn stepped forward, clutching her designer handbag. "Young man, have some respect for your elders. It's just a parking space. Surely you can walk a bit for the sake of a lady's comfort." "It's not just a space, it's my assigned space," I replied, my patience thinning. "The HOA rules, the ones you wrote, Brenda, say that unauthorized vehicles in assigned spots will be towed at the owner's expense." Brenda chuckled, a dry, raspy sound. "I am the HOA, Elias. I think I can grant a temporary waiver for my own mother. Don't be difficult, it's a bad look for the neighborhood." They didn't move. In fact, Brenda signaled for Evelyn to lock her car and they both began walking toward Brenda's unit, dismissing me like a nuisance fly. I ended up parking in the guest overflow, lugging my groceries across 3 blocks in 95-degree heat. By the time I got home, my ice cream was soup and my temper was boiling. The next morning, I woke up to a notice of violation tucked into my front door. "Violation? Improper landscaping. Your ceramic pots are terracotta orange, which is no longer on the approved color palette for the 2026 season. Please replace them within 48 hours or face a $50 daily fine." I looked across the lawn. Brenda was standing on her porch, sipping tea and watching me. It was a declaration of war. She wasn't just taking my spot, she was trying to bleed me dry for daring to speak up. I spent the day working, but my mind was elsewhere. I reread the HOA bylaws, all 42 pages of them. Brenda was right, she had a lot of power. But the bylaws were a double-edged sword. They applied to everyone, even the president. And there was one section she seemed to have forgot. Section 8.4, no officer or member shall grant parking exceptions without a formal vote from the board recorded in the minutes. That evening, I returned from a late-night coffee run at 11:00 p.m. As I turned the corner, I saw them, not one but 2 cars. Brenda's sedan was parked in my spot, and her mother's SUV was parked directly behind it, blocking the fire lane and half of the neighbor's driveway. They were flaunting it, they knew I was frustrated, and they were double parking just to show me who owned the pavement. I pulled over, my heart hammering. I could have knocked on her door, I could have pleaded, but I knew Brenda. To her, kindness was a sign of weakness. I looked at the sign posted at the entrance of our complex: strictly enforced, reliable towing services. I pulled out my phone and dialed. The tow truck driver, a massive guy named Mike with a no-nonsense attitude, arrived 20 minutes later. He looked at the cars, then at his clipboard, then at me. "You the owner of the unit?" he asked. "I am, and here is my deed showing this is my assigned spot. And there," I pointed to the SUV, "is a vehicle blocking a designated fire lane, which is a city ordinance violation." Mike grinned. "I love an easy one. Usually people are screaming at me by now." "Oh, the screaming hasn't started yet," I muttered. He hooked up Evelyn's SUV first. It was a heavy vehicle and the metal chains clanked loudly in the midnight silence. As the back of the SUV lifted into the air, a front door flew open. Brenda marched out in a silk robe, her face contorted in a mask of pure fury. What do you think you're doing? Unhook that car this instant. Mike didn't even stop. Private property, ma'am. Vehicle is unauthorized and blocking a fire lane. I am the president of this association, Brenda shrieked. I authorized it. I stepped out from the shadows of my porch. Actually, Brenda, I checked the bylaws. You need a board vote for an exception. Since there was no meeting tonight, this car is a trespasser, and since your car is in my spot, it's next. Evelyn appeared behind Brenda, looking less like a frail grandmother and more like a gargoyle. You little thief, you're stealing my car. Brenda, call the police. Please do, I said calmly. I'd love to explain to the police why you're blocking emergency access to the entire block. Brenda was vibrating with rage. She pulled out her phone and started filming me. You are finished in this neighborhood, Elias. I will have your equity stripped. I will find every weed in your yard. I will. Clack clack whir. Mike had finished securing the SUV. He hopped into the cab and started to pull away. Wait, Brenda yelled, running after the truck. My mother's medication is in there. The impound lot opens at 8:00 a.m., Mike shouted out the window. Bring your wallet. But we weren't done. Mike's partner, driving a second truck, pulled up right behind him. I had called for a double header. Brenda stopped dead in her tracks as the second driver began backing up toward her sedan. No, she whispered, her voice cracking, you wouldn't. Section 8.2, I said. Assigned spots are for the use of the resident only. You taught me that when you find me for my sister's car last Christmas, remember? You said rules are the fabric that keeps us from sliding into chaos. The neighborhood lights were flicking on now. Neighbors, people Brenda had bullied for years, were peeking through their blinds. Some were even coming out onto their balconies. Elias, let's be reasonable, Brenda said, her tone shifting into a desperate, oily sweetness. It's late, we're all tired, just tell him to stop and I'll move it myself. The call is already logged, Brenda, the fee is already generated, and honestly, I've already walked my groceries across the complex once this week. I think I'll enjoy the view tonight. As the second truck hoisted Brenda's car into the air, Evelyn began to wail. It was a high-pitched, theatrical sound that echoed off the townhouses. My hip, my nerves, we are being attacked. You're being towed, I corrected. There's a difference. The next 48 hours were a whirlwind. Brenda tried to call an emergency HOA meeting to have me evicted, but she ran into a problem. To hold an emergency meeting, she needed a quorum of board members. It turned out I wasn't the only one tired of her. The other board members, Mr. Henderson, who she'd fined for his excessively loud wind chimes, and Sarah, who had been harassed over the color of her holiday lights, suddenly found themselves busy. Without the board's backing, Brenda was just a woman with a very expensive impound bill. It cost her and her mother nearly $900 to get both vehicles back, including the overnight storage and the fire lane violation surcharge. But the real climax came at the monthly open forum on Friday. The community center was packed. Brenda sat at the front table looking haggard. Her mother sat in the front row, glaring at everyone who walked in. The first item on the agenda, Brenda snapped, is the harassment of the president by certain residents. I stood up before she could continue. Actually, Brenda, I think the first item should be the petition for a vote of no confidence. I held up a stack of papers. Over the last 3 days, I had gone door to door. I didn't even have to try hard. Once people heard that Brenda's car had been towed for violating her own rules, the floodgates opened. People were laughing, sharing stories, and most importantly, signing. You can't do this, Evelyn hissed from the front row. My daughter has dedicated her life to this community. She's dedicated her life to counting the blades of grass on my lawn, Mr. Henderson shouted from the back. Let the boy speak. I walked to the front and laid the petition on the table. The bylaws state that if 60% of the residents sign, we can call for a new election. We have 75%. Brenda looked at the signatures. Her face went from red to a ghostly, pale white. She realized, perhaps for the first time, that her power wasn't a right, it was a privilege that she had abused until it snapped. I was just trying to keep the standards up, she whispered, her bravado finally crumbling. Standards are fine, I said, but they have to apply to you too. You can't park in my life and expect me to stay in the guest lot. The resolution was swifter than I expected. Brenda resigned that night, unable to face the humiliation of a formal removal. Within a month, she and Evelyn put their units up for sale. I think they realized that a neighborhood where people actually talked to each other wasn't the kind of place they wanted to be. The new HOA board is much more relaxed. We still have rules, sure, but we also have a new policy. If you're having a party or a guest over, you just send a quick text to your neighbor. Now, every evening when I pull into my spot, I take a second to look at the pavement. It's just a rectangle of asphalt and some painted lines. But to me, it's a reminder that no matter how much power someone thinks they have, the rules of common decency apply to everyone. In my terracotta pots, I bought 3 more. They look beautiful in the sun. As I walked into my house today, I saw a moving truck outside Brenda's old unit. The new neighbor, a young guy with a mountain bike, waved at me. "Hey," he called out, "is it okay if I park here for just 10 minutes while I unload this sofa?" I smiled, of course, welcome to the neighborhood. I went inside, sat on my couch, and enjoyed the silence. It wasn't the forced, oppressive silence of Brenda's reign, it was the quiet of a place where everyone finally had their rightful place. I never thought I'd be the guy who called the tow truck on a grandmother, but then again, I never thought I'd meet an entitled duo like them. Some lessons are learned in books and some are learned on the curb. As for me, I'm just happy to finally be parked at home. The title of the story was A Badge of Honor Now, a story told at neighborhood barbecues about the time the Karen met her match. HOA Karen and her mom took my parking spot, so I towed both their cars. It was a long title, but every word of it felt like justice.